Welcome to On the Rise. I am Evan Murray, and this is awesome. We're here to talk about all the fun facts of Chinese language music. What does it mean to you that in Canada, we are now elevating the Chinese languages? What does that mean to you as an individual?
As an individual, it's amazing. But you have to kind of remove it. It's like, how much are they elevating the individual and how much are they just elevating the economics? And like from my side, I understand that economics drives a lot of decision making, but there is still something lacking in there of like, what the West likes to call soft power, and they even use that in China. But the reality is like that appreciation for what the language brings culturally, not just like what it brings economically. Like you're not learning Chinese so you can go and do business in China. You're learning Chinese because you're interested in cultural things that you only get access to if you know Chinese. And I think that hasn't really happened yet. I think most of the decision for Chinese language classes and even Chinese study around the world right now is kind of more of an economic one. And that's because culturally, that's the message that you see that, China, as far as the world is concerned, or most of Asia, as far as the world is concerned, except for Korea, which apparently is all American pop that's been like kind of Asiafied. But it's kind of like outside of that, all they really know a lot about Asian culture is that, it's where people have money, make money, they do stuff, they manufacture, and they kind of skirt over the fact that, China or most of Asia
7,000 years of history.
Exactly. Yeah. And invented all of this cool shit, and also have like all this literature and art and music that just hasn't been exposed in any way in Western culture. My cousin actually is a professor of Asian art at Boston University, and her husband is as well. And so for me, like, I was not exposed to that until we go to a museum and she would point stuff out, and she was explained it to me, and not all of it. I mean, obviously I didn't do it enough. I was drinking too much and learning too little, I think, when I was with her. But just the way that she talked about it, I realized like, holy shit, this art is incredibly cool, but it's just a different aesthetic than what we know from like this kind of Judeo-Christian background, Romanesque, classical aesthetic. There's a totally different set of aesthetics, but it's also an incredible way of communicating that has just completely been buried by history. And most kids don't know anything about it. Therefore, they don't have any interest. So as far as they're concerned, they're learning Chinese to make some money. They're not learning Chinese because there's wealth of culture that they haven't tapped yet.
Part of the reason why I joined this organization, and I'm working with them because I thought it would be a great advantage for Canada if they were elevating the Chinese languages. And now here you are. Right? It's like you're, exactly. Yeah. Truthfully, right? Truthfully. Yeah. But I didn't even think I was thinking that way. I was just thinking that way.
Economics it's a spark. I'm glad for anything when there was like if it's spark, like it's kind of like the 1980s when there were two groups of people that started learning Japanese in the 1980s. The kids that were really into manga, one group, and the kids that were like, had their parents saying, oh, you're going to do business in Japan one day. It's kind of like studying the second language in order to have like, on your college resume that you have a special language and you can do this. So it can be a two-pronged thing. It's just we're kind of missing the second prong right now. And that's in part to blame because my theory on that is that China didn't really have modern access to modern culture until I would say the last 15 years, in part because it didn't have the economics internally for it. There was, piracy. There was also a lack of investment in cultural industries. And that's all just starting now. So you have like this giant kind of monolith of consumers, like 1.5 billion. But at the same time, they were just kind of internal, like doing everything. They had no interest in going out. And also at the same time, they barely had a functioning system of their own. And then you had Taiwan, which was basically, you're in Taiwan now. They were just sucking up American culture. And they had like, very strong neighbors in Japan and other countries that also were pumping out a lot of popular culture. So and then they were also kind of, just popping out pop culture for China, like Mando pop. So it was kind of like, this is for China market. We're going to kind of, take American pop music and kind of, take all the sharp edges off of it, put it in Mandarin and sell it to the Chinese. And then we're just going to suck up as much of the American culture as we can internally, because there was a geopolitical reason for that. I worked in the music industry for 20 years in various aspects. So there's a lot of debate with different people over time. And you know, I just, but I kind of feel like, you know, this is, you can hate on 80 Rising, you know, or you can hate on a lot of these other things for certain aspects of them that, you know, even I don't like. But at the same time, it's like you have to realize that it's kind of like, you know, the tipping point. All of these things kind of suppressed the Chinese language as a force to be reckoned with, so culturally, for a long time. You know, you had the Iron Curtain, and you had communism, you had, like, you know, a lack of development, and then China played catch up to the modern world for the last 20 or 30 years, actually since like the late 80s, so it's like almost 40 years now. And then now you have all of this other stuff going on that we're not going to mention, that is again suppressing it. So it's never really had the freedom to kind of join this kind of modern music market, you know, if you want to, from the market point of view, or from even the conversation point of view. It never really had the impetus. It didn't have the money. It didn't have the power. It didn't have like the cultural know-how of how the system worked to even join it. So we came to a point about 15 years ago. They realized this, and they started putting all this money into supposedly soft power, investing in films, investing in an infrastructure for music. And all that also about 5 or 6 years ago came very much to an abrupt and ugly halt. So I don't know what the future is. From systemic point of view, though, it's much better than it was when I started. There's opportunity, there's curiosity, there's also artists that are frankly at a very high level. But at the same time, it's not quite there yet. So we can't blame everything on the fact that, oh no, they're just not interested. They haven't done anything. Like, that's part of the issue. But big part of the issue is that with there were geopolitical reasons why Spanish were brought into, you know, the United States in the 1940s. There was like this fight against the Iron Curtain that actually pushed a lot of Latin American culture into the U.S. It was funded by the government. It was, you know, everything. They were saying, oh, we're going to embrace Latin culture. We're going to embrace the Spanish language. You know, we have Lucy and Desi, you know, we're going to do all this stuff because we see what's happening in Latin America, and we have to fight this cultural war, and we have to let our population embrace that we need to be here in this cultural war. But they didn't have that in Asia, because Asia was kind of like too far away from the borders. You know, it was just, it was napalm and Agent Orange. It wasn't like trying to win the hearts of the people. Yeah. So that was the line. That was a line that was drawn, and that took generations to erase. Now, for the first time, I think Asians in general are seeing themselves not as refugees, not as new immigrants trying to make some money and establish themselves in society, but as having some sort of cultural worth. And I think a lot of that comes from second and third generation Asians as well, really finding their self-worth and finding their voice. And, you know, for someone like me, I appreciate how they've led me into realizing my own my own brainwashing, you know, in a way.
This is, I mean, I guess the thing is, this is getting into, like, this is really sociological now. Like, we're really playing with the fabric of, you know, how things are kind of working, and what the power of language is, and how that integrates into countries, and what it does into culture aspects and pop culture, and how that works into subculture, into mainstream culture. Like, I mean, it's quite like, and I mean, how can you not even swim through these things? Because obviously language is something that connects us. I mean, it literally is the tool we use to associate, right? To communicate.
Right.
I mean, it's like it's inescapable. But I mean, where the depth of where you're going is something that I mean, obviously the world's never going to be a perfect place. I think we all can try to chew on that as long as we want to, but the other thing is too, though, there's I like, do you want to call it appropriation? Like, how do we set this straight? Like, how do we get straight with this stuff? I mean, maybe this is a start. Maybe elevating the Chinese languages is a start. Like, maybe that's just the start, where conversations like this
Mm.
have to be inside of programs like that, or they have to be associated, because we have to stay conscious of what we're doing while we're doing it.
Well, I think
Um,
I think like it's a general movement. I think Chinese as a language is an access card. Once you have that access card, you can open up a whole range of things that you wouldn't have had access to. You can look at things from a different angle if you choose to. Of course, it's like a particular generation. There's lots of people who speak English who still choose to be blind to what's going on in the English world. But but I think the ultimately what we need to do as a world, not just in China, is to say that okay, the old belief that there is this supreme one thing, like Anglo-Saxon culture, Western culture, whatever, that doesn't exist anymore. There are different perspectives, different points of view, and culturally, there is no taste that says one thing is
Dominant, right?
dominant anymore, right?
Yeah.
And we just have to say that the real person, the real hipsters of the future, the person who should be like, the cultural like leaders of the future are someone who is frankly just more open and more exploratory and is willing to try more things, learn more languages, see more points of view, and be more subjective at times. And
That's a beautiful vision.
objective,
That's
sorry.
a that I mean, that's a very sweet and endearing thing to say, because I mean that has absolutely nothing about dominance, but just the, like, let's say it's like, in the clarity of respect, right? There's just a clarity of respect that, hey, there's these different things about our world, and one is not better or bigger than the other. They're just not the same.
Yeah.
um, and then that can be used to also for greater advantages, and not just economically, right? Like, it
Well,
can be used for experience and thinking and cognition, because if
and problem solving.
and
And
problem solving.
that
There
is
you
the
go.
biggest
Yeah.
issue right now in the world is that we have a lot
Wow.
of people who don't problem solve, they just react. There's a big line between problem solving and reacting. Reacting is deciding to leave that comment, that troll comment on that stupid page about like something that you read. That's a reaction. Problem solving is taking a look at the problem and saying, okay, how can I take all the perspectives from all the different people and find a solution in that works best? But first, I have to be willing to listen to other perspectives. I have to be willing to listen to other perspectives from other cultures as well. And I think one of the things is the polarization goes away once you give yourself the ability to access different points of view. And language is a huge point of access. Culture is a big point of access. Listening, frankly, is a big point of access. Reading is a big point of access. Getting off of your own algorithm and just checking out other people's stuff, people that you don't necessarily agree with. Like, I hate InfoWars. But the other day I tried to do a perspective of like the what if.
Sure.
Can I find anything in InfoWars that actually might be an interesting and intelligent thought? Um, and I hate to
Aliens.
say this, but yeah, some of the perspectives, most of it was just complete BS. But there were a couple of perspectives of like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. I would not have seen it from that perspective. But I'm not agreeing with it, but it's a perspective, and if I don't just say, okay, this is just absolute crap, this is absolutely just bad, false news, like, super polarized, bad, 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 all around, bad, 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 everything, bad, bad, bad. And we've learned to do that a lot in our current culture. And that bad can get turned really quickly. Like,
Oh,
now can be like, oh, Asians, bad, 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 like, and it's like, well, yeah, is every single white person okay? Is every single black person okay? No, it's there's a lot of different aspects. There's a lot of complexity. if you don't choose to see the complexity, if you choose to not think, to not problem solve, to not listen to the people that you disagree with, then what ends up happening is that you're just easy to manipulate, creature of reaction. It doesn't matter if your point of perspective is from the left or from the right, if you're a progressive, if you're a regressive. Everything is ultimately still
reactive.
Yeah, brainless.
People have to sit it out. They have to think it out. They
They
have
have to,
to come to some sort of determination, or they have to determinize between themselves, right? They
and
have
they
to
all,
communicate
and they have to find tools because, like, you don't get smarter just sitting, by yourself thinking.
in your head, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you get smarter by talking to people. You get smarter by listening to different perspectives. You get smarter by understanding different theories. Be a detective. Don't just agree with the people that you think you're most alike with. Start learning to play devil's advocate, even if you don't want to do it out loud, because it can cause a lot of really bad conversations to happen. You can still do devil's advocate in your head, you know?
Okay. Talk to me about your grandparents a little bit. So did they have a big effect on your music career, and what were they listening to?
My
Can
grandparents
we
are all
talk
dead.
about that a bit? Okay. No, I'm
Except for my
sorry. Sorry about
no,
that.
it's okay. My grandmother was the only person kind of that I can remember very clearly because my grandfather died before I was born on my father's side, and my other grandparents on my mother's side they passed very close to each other, like around when I was about 4 or 5. So I have very kind of like deep memories of them, like kind of feelings, emotions, like, safety and warmth and love. But it's very hard to pinpoint exact details because, it's just too young for it. But I know that they love me. And I think that that's really beautiful for me. But my grandmother lived until she was in her 90s, and she didn't pass away until I was, I think, about 18, about no, almost 20 years old. So she in her later years, as you get older, you kind of start regressing at one point, you become more childlike. I remember like in her hospital bed, she used to just sing the songs that my grandfather loved. And then, we had these like kind of dancing dolls, like where if you clap your hand, they start like dancing and then they play a little music. And she got really into those, like in her like final year of life, and her whole entire hospital room was like full of these like silly dancing dolls. And we would randomly turn them on, and then she would clap her hands and we would start singing and dancing. And
Yeah.
we were like so silly, but she found happiness in that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that she did, I don't remember the track, but I know she used to hum it. Like when you get old enough, you can't really carry a tune so much. It becomes like and I remember my aunt told me that was like the track that my grandfather like told her that it was their track, and it was like some Russian folk song that he had learned during his time in World War II when he was like fighting in the front line. He was fighting in Dongbei, which is like on the northern border of China, right next to Russia. And at one point, one of the biggest dogfights, like in the Sino-Japanese War, or World War II, as we know it here. And at one point, they were outmanned, outgunned, and so they kind of escaped through the forest and into Russia, where the Japanese couldn't technically cross over to, and they hid out in the village for like a while until they recovered, and then they kind of fought back in. And that time in that village is when my grandfather picked up a lot of Russian culture, village style, dwarf style, like village style Russian culture. And he got really into Russian music. And so when he got back to China, he kept a lot of old records around of old Russian folk songs. And this was purged during the Cultural Revolution, and he actually had all of his records burned. But for whatever reason, that music kind of became like my grandmother's like symbol for him
Wow.
after he was killed. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you could write a book about that. Just about
She
that,
did
right?
write a
I
book.
mean, like,
Before she
okay.
got too old, she finished a book about him. And it's extremely nostalgic and romantic. I mean, it's from her perspective. But yeah, she finished a book. It took her over a decade, but she finished a book about their relationship. And she published
Wow.
it. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I even know this stuff is because,
And you're like
um,
carrying that with you. So that's a like a there's an impression there, right? Like this has there's gravity in your life about this. Like even the way you talk about it is so endearing that I was like, oh my God, that's why I said, oh my God, there should be a book because of just the endearment that you have. So like that must carry with you, right? Like through what you're doing or why you like certain things you'll care about. Like this must have that flavoring with it as well.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that you lose as an immigrant a lot of times is that you lose this heritage of your culture and your family stories, because I think most Asian cultures have a very strong sense of family, and these stories are handed down. These stories are carried on the backs of individuals and elders. And I, again, I think one of the reasons why I remember that break for me when I was 6 years old coming to the United States. And I think a lot of other Asians that grew up in the US, they never had very little exposure to this. Is the strength that comes from the mythology of your own family. And a certain amount of it is mythology, like
The
I'm sure it was
mythology of your
romanticized.
own family. No, yeah, no, but I mean, this is again narratives. I mean, this is a lot of the things that people are talking about in the modern world now. That I mean, it's and things that we know in the music industry now too. It's like when we sit at conferences and we talk to people about, okay, so what makes an artist great? I mean, one of the things we're talking about is the narrative behind the artist, right? Like it's like
A
you're not
lot of
talking
it's
about people's
constructed. Yeah.
songs, you're talking about their
Yeah.
story, right?
Yeah. It is. You talk about the story, and it's unfortunate in the last like in what we consider, like, the music industry as like the great generations of, like, starting from the 1940s on to the 19 yeah, even through the beginning of the 1980s. You had people with incredible narratives. And then something happened after in the 1990s. Like, I think I would say even during the time of new metal and stuff, where these kind of personal narratives like went away, and then people had to create narratives because like it became such a job, and it wasn't a very well earning job. So only like less than 0.1% of artists that start out as artists ever make a living doing what they're
A
doing.
living, sure.
Yeah. So a lot of
Yeah.
people, there's like this trajectory for art. There's like these like schools. There's like these, things you have to do, and these markers and social media you have to keep up with. And it keeps people very busy doing a lot of really pointless things that they don't really live life. So I find a lot of artists, even as I was a record executive for a bit in my own label, like as you get to these artists in their like mid 20s and late 20s, have been doing music for a long time, it's like they kind of lack a certain amount of life experience because their life experience wasn't necessarily very fulfilling. It was a lot of social media. It was a lot of taking
Mm.
pictures of themselves on tour and going on endless touring where they didn't really get to experience the cities very much because, of the costs of touring. They usually just had to, it was pretty
Stay in
hardcore. I
their
spent most of the time
hostel,
doing
go to the
basically
bar,
labor.
go to the
Right.
hostel. Right, right,
Yeah,
right, right, right.
exactly. So and then there's like this financial crunch, and then there's like kind of this removal from life. And the thing is, like, I remember I was part of that as well. And it was weird when I had to stop because of COVID and I had a baby, even before then, that I felt like this for the first time, like somebody turned on the tap again. Um, Even though I was doing stuff that, I had considered drudgery for most of my life, that repetition, the active drudgery, and the little minute things that happen every single day with my child growing up was giving me an experience that was like so incredible and fulfilling. And I had to wait until my 40s to get it. So I was thinking, wow,
Wow.
like normal people these days probably have richer lives so far as storytelling and emotional growth than most musicians do. No wonder the music industry is kind of in a glut. You know, we went from the BB Kings of the world, growing up and playing strings on the porch as a sharecropper. What amazing stories they must have had, coming out of the slave era to like and civil rights and all of this stuff, just this this story upon story upon story, like flooding every single person's life to like this homogenous culture of sound. And you're just trying to make the sound different because the people aren't different. So you just tweak a little bit here, add a hi-hat there, change the synthesizer use or whatever new, fad it is, or the way the beat is kind of constructed, because you're trying to create freshness in something that's relatively stagnant. And the thing that is fresh is just living life, having experience that is outside of touring. Um, and I think that's something as a musician you really have to think about, of how the music industry is actually incredibly fucking boring in a way. And it sounds really horrible, but like also in the old days, music was a way out for poor people. So people with like these really incredible struggles and life differences, like, they came up through being able to play the guitar a lot better than someone else. They were able to conquer racism because they knew how to create an incredible, like, a set of lyrics. They were able to express their political ideas that were being suffocated elsewhere through a track that could not even play on the radio. And this was all this was happening. And now you have a culture of rich kids that studied, guitar since age 6 with like expensive Fenders that, they probably shouldn't have owned. And then they have all of these skills, and then they're constantly looking at social media, judging like, how to get more clicks, and posting pictures of themselves 2 or 3 times a day on Instagram, putting up TikTok videos, doing all this stuff to try and generate like, numbers. And what they're not doing is actually having anything to say. Yeah, they have nothing to say.
And they have nothing to say. Yeah, like it's literally an industry propagated off of like, and the thing is, it's too bad because music is a soulful experience. It's an experience, is what it is. I mean, even from my perspective, well, yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, like from like I like where my parents and family are from. Like I have a Canadian kind of Irish, Scottish background, and that's from the island of Newfoundland, and it's a very distinct culture there. And people literally just gather in people's kitchens and they just sing together. That's what they do, and but nobody wants to have a music career, because if you did that, you wouldn't be able to pay your bills. You know what I mean?
All right. So like,
they'll go work in the oil
life.
field, and then they just use music as their escape from the life that they hate. But they do the life that they hate for money, because they can't do music before, right? So it's strange how we have things arranged, I think. But I think you're touching on a few points that I think are very prevalent, and again, very insightful. When it comes to favorite music, like let me grab you, and you have a 3-year-old son, is that correct?
I have he's just turned 3.
Okay, so he's 3 years old. And do you guys have similar taste in music? Are you kind of bringing him in on things that you like?
God,
or tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, I tried. I think like most music parents, when he's in the womb, you're like, okay, dude, I'm going to expose you to good stuff. And, I'm sitting there, put on like, I was like, okay, today is going to be James Brown's album. I'm going to put this on my belly and listen to some funk. And then we're going to go through the music education of the decades from funk out group like this album.
Okay.
We're going to get a little bit of here, and then we're going to go into like the disco era, but like the good stuff, not like, and then we're going to go into like post that and listening to it. And then after he was born, he just wanted to listen to Baby Shark, which I don't know if you know this track, but it is one of the worst. And like literally, you was like, "Mommy, I want to listen to Baby Shark." I was like, "No." And so finally, I kind of like tried different things, and I realized that maybe the beat structure or something, but like Michael Jackson, certain tracks you could get into, probably because of my belly training, but also because it's just kind of like got this kind of hop and rhythm. And we started by watching like Michael Jackson's drummer Because a lot of the videos, are not like baby appropriate. Like he had his old drummer that would just drum, and he had this like kind of play drum set at home, and we would listen to Smooth Criminal, where it's just a video of this guy drumming Smooth Criminal, and he got really into
Oh,
that.
okay.
And then he got into like the thriller drumming. And then eventually, I mean, I tried different things. He was into that and Outcast basically, and Outcast was also inappropriate, so it was a lot of stuff I had to like filter out. So eventually, I was like, you know what? You're 3 years old now. I think you can graduate to Thriller the video. Let me look for a baby appropriate edited version of this. And then, apparently, the only baby appropriate section is like the dance sequence with the zombies. And oh my God, that's something he has to watch at least 3 times a day. Now it's just like,
Really?
okay,
Oh, I just
mommy,
love it.
zombie dance, zombie dance. I'm like, okay, zombie dance, zombie dance. And then we just like skip to that section of the video where there's like no horror elements except the zombies dancing. And that's what he thinks zombies are. Like basically a bunch of really gnarly people dancing in formation. It's just that's what zombies do. Like, yeah. And I think I'm gonna say that my son is very current right now. So
Well, we'll start moving towards the finish line here because I don't want to keep you all night. But can you tell us a Chinese language song that you think that Canadians should listen to?
I have a Chinese language band that I really like. But I don't know if it's like if you want something that's more like I have so many because it's that was the reason why I didn't want to. I don't know. I want to like point people in the direction of like
No, no, no. Point us at you. Do whatever you want. Like I mean, and
okay.
that's don't feel bashful. Like that's totally okay.
Yeah. I mean the
What
thing is
is the
like
Chinese language band?
well, there's like this like really interesting band called PK14 that I think is just like from a language perspective, they're one of the people that lyrics wise I really love. And there's also a track from Omnipotent Youth Hotel, which is called 杀死那个石家庄人, which means to kill that guy from 石家庄, which is also one of the best lyrics in a track like that. That track is like blew this band out of the water. They went from like nobody knew them, local band in Shijiazhuang, to like all of a sudden like this track came out and then they became like festival headliner. I mean, to this day, this track is still like their track, the big track of theirs. But every time I listen to the lyrics to it, I think it's just like so deep and it's got so much storytelling in there. And PK14 is generally they're very intellectual. Like Yang Haisong, the guy who's the head of PK14, he reads a lot. And so there's a certain kind of lyricism. He's not the world's best singer because not really singing. It's kind of a lyrical like rap sing song
Euthanizing.
yeah,
Like maybe
and
he's preaching maybe in a certain way
it's
or
kind of like it's
lecturing.
like preaching or storytelling or doing a beatnik poetry slam. It's something in between. No, he doesn't have like a pretty voice. He has a voice that's very emotive. And in I think this is like slightly older stuff. Then you have like the younger stuff. I mean, I for me, I like grew up with this group of people in China. Like a lot of them are older than me, and I kind of feel like I can watch them as well. And it for me, I think the independent music scene in Asia just has so much that it's hard for me to pick out one artist that I just want to point you to. Um, it would be like, oh yeah, this is the definition of like Dou like in Taiwan you would just know him as like the husband of Wang Fei, or was ex-husband of Wang Fei, the father of her daughter, like Dou Jingtong. But he also was like incredible lyricist. It sounds dated because it is dated. It comes from the 90s, early 2000s, and it has like kind of a folky Chinese vibe on top of rock and roll, but also incredible lyrics, incredible thoughts in the way that he presents music. Obviously Cui Jian, if you want to talk about like really political and thoughtful stuff. If you want to talk about stuff that's just like really fun pop music to listen to, like there's just so much, it's like kind of this wealth of interesting music that has come out that almost nobody knows about, like Queen C, Big Shark, Hedgehog, There's like a whole entire movement of indie bands in China that came out early 2000s, and in this venue called D22, which kind of, and Dos Colegas that collected all of these bands, and also Yugong Yishan, which is no longer open. Like all of them, they were just bouncing between these different venues, including I was among that group of bouncing between these different venues and performing to like 50 people. And now all of these bands have like really influenced the entire cultural landscape of China. And it was our CBGB's moment, like it had, and it's hard to kind of remove it from like, is it Anglified music? Absolutely, because that's what they were listening to. Those are their heroes at the time, but it at the same time, the local, it doesn't sound like it was made in the West at all. It has hints, it has colors, it even has things that are straight homages, but it's not the same, and it can never be the same. And I think that's where, if you get away from the idea that anything that is not white doing something that has even a significant amount of some other culture's influence is just derivative, then you can finally see it for what it is, which is incredibly unique, interesting music.
Deeply insightful. Deeply insightful, Helen. I'm going to wrap that up there because I think you kind of really put the nail in the coffin on that one. In how vivid and informative how you describe that. And I think it kind of summarizes a lot of what we were talking about today, right? I think you just really, there's like I felt like there's like as much as we were talking about exploratory things, like there was definitely there was a head that was coming here. Like there was there was something that was going to summarize this. And I think you talking about these artists in that particular way, I think really, capitalizes on the notion of what our conversation was about today. And I'm really thankful for the time that you took to, talk with me today and to talk about, Chinese language music and also your career itself. Can you tell us again the bands that you're in and like how I would find you? Are you still performing now? Like, I mean, I know you're busy being a mom, but
But I haven't gotten back to China. My band's split. Like we're still together as a band, but we're not in the same country. So right now it's not. But I will be going back to China in probably late October, or early November. But yeah, I mean, you can check out my stuff. I have some stuff on Spotify, everywhere in the world. I'm not sure about Canada because weirdly, I had so many messed up deals with different groups that over time, like there was a lot of chaos, and I'm still trying to sort that out now that I've left my a lot of that, just getting pieces of my life back together after COVID. But if you can look up Nova Heart, and not the Spoons song, but there's stuff on Nova Heart on Spotify. There's stuff for I think that's it. Maybe bits and pieces of my other acts, but I think Nova Heart is like where I want to kind of point everyone to on Spotify. And
Cool. Well, I'll
yeah.
definitely be looking. Do you have anything on YouTube as well? Like, did you make any
Yes.
videos for?
Yes, lots. The YouTube videos are made by really impressive people that were living and working in China. Some of them are expatriates, some of them are local, and you can see it. It's really cool stuff that I'm really proud of a lot of the artists that have come and helped me with my music videos, and you can watch it. And we try and do something that is like kind of, you'll see the horror movie influences and the Kubrickian. I forgot what the Kubrick-esque. But
Kubrick, the director.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the word that you're supposed to say. Somewhat like Kubrick when you do like the 1 point focus. Anyway, there's stuff in there. And you can just go and check out Nova Heart on YouTube. We have a couple of videos on YouTube as well. And
Okay,
don't
thank
even
you. And
add our
are you
Instagram
active
account
on
to see
social
there.
media? Okay, there we go.
I'm,
Sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
horrible on social media. I'm absolutely horrible. I've been chastised over and over again. I'm okay on Chinese social media because there's actually people running it, not me. But I was supposed to be running the Western social media, and you will see that my Instagram account is the most pathetic thing. I actually just started it a couple of weeks ago. That's how bad I am. There's like, yeah, as my social media is like, there's a Facebook account that's gone through different management points, different people managing it, and it's been relatively neglected lately. But I have to say, like, in a way, I'm surprised I have a career at all based on how crappy I am at social media. But I've been lucky. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's about it. So, thank you very much, Helen, and thank you for joining me today. And let's see what happens in the future. It's really nice to be in touch.
Yeah, it was nice. I was nice talking a long time with you. Okay.